What's up, everybody? Welcome to podcast now, Back to the Past. I'm Alex, and in this video, I want to talk about Death Stranding as we get ever so close to Death Stranding 2 on the beach. Let me tell you, okay, I played this game when it first came out, and it just didn't click. So I thought, all right, well, we're getting so close to the sequel. I got to give it another chance, right? I have to go back in, and I got to tell you, I think a good overview, and we're going to break down each individual part of this game. I got a lot to say because this is a Hideo Kojima game, okay? And there's always a lot to say, I think, with those. I love a good amount of Death Stranding, but I think the more important thing is that I can respect almost all of it, if not maybe all of it. Does it all click even now, right? I'm a 6-year older individual, right? Giving it another try. And, I played an okay amount of this game back in the day. I want to say I put like 8-9 hours, which maybe isn't all that much, but, I put in some time. And then I remember looking through the story. Now, I don't think I looked at everything, but I definitely looked at like the last 3, 4, 5 hours, which is a classic Hideo Kojima ending where it is just like almost pure cutscenes, right? And I remember loving the story. I remember thinking, oh, this is a cool concept. I have forgotten almost all of that in the last 5.5 years, okay? So I remember certain key elements. There were a couple twists that weren't actually twists because I kind of remembered them. But for a good amount of this game, I was playing it, I would say, for the first time, right? Giving it another chance. And like I said, I think I take away from it a lot of respect for just the entire premise, for even the gameplay. But I don't know if I would say I love it all, right? I think there's actually several elements that still, to this day, did not click. All right, so enough of an overview. Let's talk about it. And I feel like we really just have to kind of break it down into segments. So let's first start with just the gameplay. This is something I want to say you're going to be doing it a lot, and you are. And really, it's up to you how much you do it. And also, I wouldn't actually say this is like 99. Oftentimes in games you say, well, look, most of the game you're going to be doing the gameplay. Don't know if I would agree with that with this game, right? A lot of it is the dialogue and the story and the lore and stuff. But no, depending on how much you want to go in, you are going to be playing this game an enormous amount of time. Now, here's the deal. I beat this game in 33 hours, okay? I was not over here putting 40, 50, 60, 70 hours into the game. You absolutely could. I've taken a look at the platinum, and I thought, could I do it? And the answer is, I think, yes, but you got to go all in. And that is, again, something that just didn't really click for me. Now, the main point of the game, right? Connection. You're trying to connect all of these different areas, let's say, and because they can range, right? And even like the civilizations that you're actually connecting to the chiral network are changing depending on which one you're talking about. But the whole base game is go out there and generally walk from east to west, or you could, I guess, bike, or you could use vehicle, whatever you want to do, but go from east to west and connect approximately 25 areas, right? And probably more to the chiral network. And in the middle of that, you will take deliveries, and everything is going to be thrown at you, and then everything is going to be built on. Now, I would say where the high respect for this game comes nowadays, okay? Number one, the world is a character, and oftentimes you can say that, right? In fact, that makes, I think, a pretty darn good game when you say, oh man, that location in a game really felt like a place, therefore I'm going to label it a character, and that kind of elevates the game. The thing is, like, does the USA really feel like the USA in this game? Not really, but it has a texture to it all in its own. It feels so unique, and because of what you're doing, every feeling I have about like the level design comes from what you're doing, the gameplay, literally walking, literally delivering orders, and that elevates, I feel like, everything else, even if I don't connect with it. So like I found out, or I realized very shortly in, right? Like I didn't play that many hours, and I realized, all right, this game is really however much you want to give to it, because if you just do the general stuff, honestly, I think you could beat it less than 33 hours. Okay, I think mine was a little bit higher because I did do optional orders. And what I would do as I started to get into this game is realize, all right, here's the deal. I am not going to go out of my way an unbelievable amount to do it. It just wasn't something I felt the need to do. But what I will do is I'll try to game it. I'll try to do my own game plan. I'll say, all right, if I know I'm going to backtrack, I'll take an order. It's no big deal. You don't have to. You could just take the main orders. But I've thought, all right, if I'm going to, I'm going right to left, and all of a sudden now I'm going left to right. I'm going back to a place, Mountain Knot City, right? You're going somewhere that you've already been before, right? Because, Die Hardman or somebody tells you to go there. And you say, all right, well, I could just go there empty-handed, or I could take an optional delivery there. Once they opened up the auto, delivery bots, right? Which actually, by the way, in the second game seems to be elevated. But, okay, now there's this idea that they've created these bots, and it can do these standard orders for you. And I feel like that's a good way of gaming the system to get the platinum, which again I didn't attempt, but because you have to max out all of the likes in all of the different places. You have to get 5 stars. Well, to do those auto deliveries, I mean, that saves you a ton of time, right? You're having bots do it for you. Time passes while you're doing things. You can rest in your private room and time will pass. So those are kind of the gamey things that I started to do to say, look, I'll take the orders I feel like. But I mean, if you're going to give me an order that's like 110 pounds and it's totally out of the way and I'm going to have to cross a freaking mountain to do it, I'm just not going to do that. If it's on the way, I'll do it, or I'll try to plan routes to line up. Okay, all that stuff. And again, that's where the respect comes in. That's where, number one, why is it even like that? Well, it's because of the environment. Every section of the U.S. felt unique, right? When I got to those mountains, and there's several missions that make you trek across freaking snow and blizzard conditions, right? And you're going up these hills and there's snow, and then you have to deal with the BTs. It is unreal. If it feels and it is unlike any other game. And here's I guess the controversial thing is it's not always fun. It's not always something that connected to me and was like, okay, I need to do this. There were definitely times where it was a chore, but taking a look at it from a different angle, it's like, all right, well, it's how you plan it. It's how you going from point A to point B, how is that a thing, or why is that a thing, or what can you do with it? Well, the way you want to handle it is up to you. I'll tell you, I didn't even know you could use trucks, like the cargo trucks. I didn't use it one time. I don't even know if it was introduced to me. I paid attention throughout the whole game. I don't know if I missed it. I don't know if it was an optional thing I just didn't do. Whatever the case might be, I used motorcycles, myself, and the floating carriers. That was it. I could be mad about that, which honestly I'm not, because that, I think, again, illustrates a very strong point of this game, is that, again, it gives to you anything. It says, okay, well, here's all these deliveries, and you handle them. It doesn't even tell you, really, to handle them any way you want. It doesn't hold your hand in that way. It just lets you say, okay, well, look, we're going to give you these things that you can fabricate, and you can make these weapons, and you can make these power skeletons, and you can make the boots, and, these things will get upgrades, right, which will make them more powerful. I love that. I think the way that they built that was very smart. You think about the beginning of this game, you're walking around and you're using ladders and you're using rope, right? That's it. And then as it goes, well, those things elevate. And then also they just give you more stuff. Okay, here's floating carriers. Well, you can connect the floating carriers. Here's bots, but here's bots that follow you, but they can't follow you on rocky terrain. So you got to plan your routes accordingly. Or anything, right? Any of the weapons. Okay, here's levels 1, 2, and 3, right? They'll get more powerful. There's so many layers. There's a lot of layers on the story and the characters. We'll talk about that later, but there's layers on the gameplay too. And it got the meme of the FedEx, UPS delivery thing. And that is true, but what I can really respect is that they brought a lot of depth to that. It's not truly take an order and walk to a different location. At its base, that is what it is. But I give mad respect to them for just, really filling that in, because the environment, suddenly you have to take them more seriously. A rock has never been so dangerous. Just something sticking out of the ground. Because if you're not focused, you can listen to music in the background, or there's a soundtrack in this game that I think is phenomenal. You can almost disconnect, right? And you could just walk with Sam and do your deliveries. If you're not paying attention, and you're not balancing your weight, and you're not gripping, and you're not really taking a look at the terrain and figuring out where's the best way to walk in the next 10 steps, that's how detailed it becomes. It's not even, okay, I have to go over a winter wonderland mountain, right? It's no. You're in this little lake area, or you're just on rocks. the next 2 steps are going to determine whether I fall or not. Like, that's the seriousness that this game provides. It gives me respect for, like, the porters, like, in the game, like, they're given a lot of respect too, of, like, many people wouldn't do this job, and you freaking get it because you're doing the job. You know what I mean? So I can love a lot of it. I really can. And I feel like it can be fun. I feel like the individuality, like me doing it my own way, I guarantee you I did it differently than other people. Honestly, I would take, like, straight line approaches. If I knew I could go around something versus through it, I actually went through it. Most people, I feel, because around you could really monitor the terrain. I was like, no, I'm just going to go for it. If there's a giant mountain, I'm just going to ride over with my bike. It'll take a while, and I got to be careful, especially when you throw BTs in, right? But I'm going to attempt it, and I'm not going to go around. And I think other people would have, or other people might have used floating carriers in a different situation than me. That is so cool. And you know what? Okay, that directly brings us to another really big point of the gameplay side is, okay, well, what about the help? What about literally connecting? Now, this is where I feel like this is just Hideo Kojima, right? Kind of on another level. We might see this with OD, right? Like the future game that he's working on. That connection, the idea that other people are helping you almost inadvertently, right? It's not a multiplayer game. You're not seeing other people, in the world. You can actually see other porters, but they're just the AI. But, like, the way he does it is so unique. The idea of you going into an area and there is no chiral network, and it's like, all right, you feel isolated. Again, like, those are those layers. You know what I mean? The idea that Sam feels alone and he's trekking across the freaking U.S., and it's about getting people into the system. It's about uniting the U.S., right? But in those moments, you feel very isolated because you are. There's nothing there. There's no power. There's no people. There's maybe even enemies of BTs or mules. And once you connect, you are opened up to all of the creations that everybody else made. Now, technically, not everybody, right? I don't know how they fill the world because it can't possibly be filled with everything that everybody's ever made. But that feeling of activating an area, right, connecting them to the network, and then being able to walk back, like, go in reverse or even go forward. And now you see all of these creations. It's a very different game, I feel like, now. And maybe that's why I couldn't do it back then. I don't think I was ready to give the gameplay the time that it needed back, 5.5 years ago. I guess to be fair, right? Nowadays, it's like, okay, well, I am willing, but also there's several times where it's like, if there wasn't a bridge already built, I don't know if I would have kept going. The game is elevated, I think, so much through other people's work. And then, again, that helps the theme, that helps those layers where it's like, okay, we're all part of this, right? If I build a road, other people are going to use that road. And they did. I was getting likes throughout the whole game for my creations, and I was using other people's. But there was plenty of times where it's like, all right, if somebody didn't put that bridge there, I'd be screwed because I didn't, and that's the part. I didn't want to go out of my way for resources. That's really, I think, where the game definitely dropped down for me. Is like, I had no problem fabricating the ladders and, all of the anchor points and all that stuff. But if I had to carry around all those metals and all that stuff, right, to get to locations to then build a bridge, that's just that extra kind of padding that I don't think even now, like, I was ready to give the game. So again, like, I was very happy that a lot of, like, okay, well, I feel like this is the best path. Oh, somebody else thought of that. Somebody else made a bridge to make this, traversing a little bit easier. Sometimes they weren't so easy, but sometimes they were, because of other people's work. So, a couple layers to that. I mean, from, like, the theme of the game, I think that was done flawlessly. That was so freaking good and really helped, like, the tone of connection and that you are isolated until you're not, all that jazz. And then, like, just from the gameplay perspective, it's like, okay, this makes it a whole lot easier, right? And you can rely on other people while also doing it to yourself. I mean, the random private rooms in the middle of nowhere really came in clutch, towards the end of the game. So, those things, I was not doing it to that level. So I was really relying on other people, and I freaking loved it. So you have that element. And, like, in terms of the, like, okay, well, is it anything but walking? The answer is yes. And I will say that's another repetitious thing. I don't even know if that's a word. Just the repetition that was, in those, I'm basically talking about the war moments, right? We're going to get into spoilers because we got to talk about so many story moments. So excuse me while we go into this just a little bit. When it came to Cliff, right? Clifford and all that jazz, I enjoyed it. I enjoyed it as, like, a palate cleanser. I don't really think any of it was all that good, to be honest with you. Like, Did it feel very Metal Gear at times, and even the movement? Absolutely, and it reminded me to those days, and I liked it. And again, it wasn't bad, but like, I don't know, when you're forced to attack the BTs, like towards the end with like the giant whale, I don't know if that's really fun. Even when you have Higgs and he's in like the giant one right at the Edge Knot City, right? It's like, I don't know if I really enjoyed it. It was a good palate cleanser because I'm just opening fire, right? The war things, like, this game can get scary. The first time you run into BTs is terrifying, and it's something you almost become desensitized to as the game goes because they get more annoying. I feel, in the beginning, it's like, oh my dear God, these things are so scary, and if I make one wrong move, I'm dead. The truth is that's not really true. I mean, as you go throughout the game, it's like, all right, I can take this corner. I can get closer to that BT than I think I can. So, I think they lose a little bit of their horror element, as the game goes. And then, the fight scenes and even the fight against Cliff, like fighting against those skeletons. I mean, it's scary the first time. I think the music does a good job, but it's like, all right, well, each of them are the exact same. I think you do it 3 times, right? You go to an area, different war, and you're saying, okay, you have to find Cliff, and he controls all of these, infinite reloads, right? So it's like, all right, you have to take him out because he'll just keep spawning, his minions. So you just follow the scanner, and then you go up to him, and then you shoot him a bunch, and that's it. Then he disappears. You do it again 4 times, right? 4 times each, and you do it, I think, 3 times in all. So that's 12 times you're doing the exact same thing. So yeah, it was a palate cleanser. It was scary and kind of unique, original the first time. And then you do it more times, you say, all right. Again, like the way, I mean, we'll get into the story, the way they layer it and the storytelling way that Hideo does it, of like different angles almost of looking at the same story that's being presented to you. I love that. But just, I don't know, I wouldn't consider that to be all that fun. Again, exhilarating the first couple times you fight the big BTs, when the entire ground becomes freaking tar and stuff. It's like, all right, I'm screwed. And you have to just kind of think on your feet and just move very fast. By the end, it's like, all right, I've done this before. It's not all that deep, shooting an enemy from a distance. And, as long as you stay smart, they're not really going to hurt you all that much. It lowered, again, like the fun level, I would say. And I mean, from the gameplay perspective, there's a lot of monitoring, there's a lot of like, doing your scanner and checking for like the weather and, waiting things out in the timefall shelter and monitoring your BB. Like, there's things like that in the private room. I mean, there's a lot here. Again, like, it's easy to say it's just a UPS, delivery service, but the menus in this guy, I will say, and that's something I kind of want to talk about when it comes to Death Stranding too, man, like the map I can respect in terms of like, well, they're showing you all your routes, right? So you're seeing, or routes, whatever you want to say, you can see all the dotted lines of like where you've been. The map becomes a mess, I think, and a lot of the menus are messes. I think they derive from Metal Gear. They feel very Metal Gear with like how the information is broadcasted at you and shown to you. But I mean, just some of the worst. Honest, I will say, if there's something that's bad about this game, I can respect the map. I guess I won't hold that too much against it, but a lot of it becomes messy, very messy, just even to look at. You can't really take in the info as well as I think what he's trying to convey. So that I would say is a little bit weaker. But that's I would say that's pretty much it for the gameplay. So now what we got to do is we got to jump ship and we got to go into the story, the lore, the characters. Let me do blanket statement with the characters because I think it's rather easy, and then we'll go into more of the themes and the story. I really like the characters. I think it took a while for Sam. I like Norman Reedus. I mean, he's you look at him and how he acts in like The Walking Dead and stuff, and you say, all right, maybe a little one-dimensional. I mean, really good. And I liked him overall. I think I liked him almost more as Sam, than Daryl at times, in The Walking Dead. His character is a slow burn, and I think honestly it's just because they don't, Hideo, or whatever you want to say, it doesn't really give him a time to shine. So much of the game in the first 70-80% is really about like everything else. There's a lot of mysteries with Sam. There's a lot of mysteries with his BB, right? BB-28 or 28 or Lou, whatever. There's many ways of saying it, and maybe some of them mean different things. But there's so much there. But a lot of that is, exposition dumped at you, towards the very end. So much of the opening and just, 20, 30 hours into the game is about, all right, let's set up the world. What are BTs? What are dooms? How do they operate? What's timefall? Like all of this different, you know what I mean? Everything they're just introducing to you. And I do like it because it does get confusing, but at the same time, like they do exposition dump at you and they do it for like an hour straight. And it's like, all right, so if you have a question about this game, there is a high chance at some point they're going to answer it to you and then tell you about it for an hour. And it's like, yeah, pro con to that, but I can respect it. You know, and again, comes to the characters, that's a big part of the beginning, or I keep saying beginning, but I mean, I guess like the first 80% of the game. I mean, like Fragile, I think she's awesome. That's something that I either forgot or just didn't pay attention to the first time, is her story, you know, her background. And, you know, I like the rotation. You know, there's some characters like her that'll kind of pop in and out, but some characters kind of really get their time to shine, and then they're gone, you know, for quite some time. I guess that's kind of how they do it for everybody. It's just their importance to the story. But I think she did fantastic. I think Fragile is a great character. You know, you got Deadman, Die Hartman. You know, Guillermo del Toro as a director does, and I knew that, you know, I remember that back in the day. He exposition dumps a lot at you, but he, you know, he has a story, and you know his background with, you know, in all of them. Why are they called it? Why are they called Hartman? Why are they called Die Hard Man? Why are they called Dead Man? Why are they called Fragile? You know, all four of those, they all have like distinct reasons. Mama, you know, even that somewhat tied into her. You know, all of those characters and the stories are super good, and they hit you with them immediately. You know what I mean? Like you get Fragile and her story of what happens to her, why she wears the suits, and you know what happened with her and Higgs. I mean, Troy Baker does such a phenomenal job. You know, he's an interesting character. I feel like we're going to learn more about him in 2, because in 1, you get enough. You get like, okay, well, he wasn't necessarily all that bad at a point, but then he met Amelie and, you know, something changed with him and all that jazz. So some of them, I think they kind of hold back, but I just listed all of them. When you have Amelie or Bridget, again, depending on which one you're talking about, like they're all really, really good characters. And some of them hit me, I would say, more than others. Like I really, you know, like the mama thing with the baby, I thought that was really emotional. You know, there were some twists and turns to that, and it kind of gets more like unreal, you know, towards, I guess, again, we're spoiling it. So, you know, when she dies and they're kind of filling in the blanks of like, okay, she was always kind of dead. They did that thing where they're kind of splitting her hot and cot, right? Which, and I like that theme, and they do that a couple times in this game, but it's like, all right, I really connected, you know, with the baby loss thing and the hospital, and then it gets a little kind of crazy, but it's still, you know, it's still really, I think, good storytelling. You know, Deadman obviously then has the connection with BB, and he, again, exposition dumps at you quite a bit, but he's got, you know, a background to it. Hartman, you know, his entire thing basically, I think, is also very exposition heavy, but really about the origin point, right? These extinction entities and the 5 major extinctions. So his is so important. I mean, his is, I think they do him good too, you know, because he's got the background of losing his wife and daughter and how he's dying and purposely doing it every 20 minutes to then, you know, search the beach for them. Like he's kind of got a tragic thing, and then on top of that, he also tells you, okay, here's the entire lore history, right? Like this isn't the first time we've done this. Here's what a Death Stranding is, all of this stuff. So, you know, is the storytelling perfect? No. You know, I think some of these games, you know, again, I'm attracted to games like Kingdom Hearts and things like even a game like this, I think quite heavily. You know, there's pros and cons to giving you those mysteries. I mean, there's the mystery kind of the whole game of like who's Cliff and what's the connection to Sam, what's the connection to BB. You know, they give background to Sam, all that jazz. There's a point of like holding things back, and then also like, I don't know. I like discovery. I like sometimes figuring it out on my own, and a lot of these games tend to just throw everything at you. I mean, this game does have that problem. At the very end, right, when you're on the beach with Amelie, and the credits are rolling, right? It's the entire ending of the game. I believe that chapter is 58 minutes long, and I mean, honestly, I think he did it as almost a joke. You can walk around, but you can do nothing, right? Like you're walking around, you're getting the entire story of what happened with her, you know, just her entire background, the background of the extinction entity, everything. And you're okay, I'm following, and it's good. It's good storytelling. I like the lore of this game so much. It is an hour of just telling you things, and the amount that you're doing is nothing. You know, people flipped out with the Metal Gear Solid 4 thing. That was a cutscene. This, I would consider, the only reason this is not a cutscene, I think, defined by him, would be you can actually move around. But you can do nothing. You're literally on the beach, you're moving around, and you're doing absolutely nothing, and they're just telling you things. So it really is a 1 hour long cutscene. Again, again, is there pacing problems? Oh, there absolutely is. The middle of this game, once you get to the snowy kind of mountain area, it starts to drag because the deliveries start to become a pain in the rear end. And then towards the very end, you just get the entire story. You want to know about Cliff? We'll tell you about him. You want to know about Die Hardman and what actually happened there? We'll tell you. You want to know that, like, Sam kicked off this entire thing and that, there was a plan from the beginning with Amelie and Bridget and her being an extinction entity. And after seeing Sam sacrifice, which she wanted him to do anyway, but then after realizing it, she said, you know what? Me triggering, the end of humanity is not the best idea. We're not going to do this last extinction thing or last stranding, whatever they called it. And so, we're done. But the sixth extinction will still happen. It's just that I've delayed it for right now. I mean, they throw so much at you. And again, there's beautiful moments. There is beautiful, like seeing the entire Cliff thing. I think that was so well done. Him talking to Sam, the repetition, because you'll see scenes multiple times. Every time Sam plugged in BB, right, throughout the game, you were seeing it all from his perspective, but things were daisy, right? And you couldn't make out some stuff, right? But then at the very end, they said, okay, here's the entire arc. Here's literally what's going on. And we're going to show it from like a pulled back camera angle, and we're going to show the entire story of what happened with Cliff and his baby, right? And then we're going to connect it to Sam. We're going to have him say similar lines that he just did, in the war zone to him a few hours ago. We're going to do all these connections. And in fact, again, the idea of connecting, they connect the story in all of these very unique ways that really only games like this are capable of. So, a lot of that stuff I liked. Again, it's just kind of the pacing. It's the weirdness of it. But I enjoy, everything that I just kind of threw at you just now really felt like how Hideo Kojima threw it at me. The idea of what the extinctions are and Death Stranding and what are BTs and what are Dooms and what's Sam's part to play and who's Cliff and all of this stuff. They answer it. I think they answer it really, really well. And it is confusing. I honestly feel like I've played more confusing games. So I think once I actually do it, back in the day, I watched a lot of the stuff. I watched it, and it's like you can get it. I think watching it again now is like, okay, I can refresh my memory. See, I remembered about the whole Sam and Cliff, them being father and son. I remembered that. I knew he was that BB, so I remembered that. I didn't know, I forgot or didn't know just in general the experiments that were being performed on BBs, why they started, they were decommissioned, they were restarted, all, kind of like the finer details, the extinction, why she wanted to do it, and then she called it off. A lot of that stuff, I had forgotten. So really in that way, I was experiencing it for the first time. But it is a different kind of game. I wanted to, I kind of wanted that statement to be a little bit more like powerful, like you really will struggle to play another game like Death Stranding. And I will say, again, maybe controversially, if this wasn't Hideo Kojima, because it's so far out there and the gameplay is so far out there. Again, it's got layers, but it's so different, but also being like, I think to a lot of people it's a turnoff. If this wasn't Kojima, I really don't know how well this game would do. Like, I don't know how much of a chance people would give it. And to be honest with you, we know the numbers. We know this game did like 20 million players, not sales, right? Sales, it probably did 5, 6, 7 million. And then everybody else was through, subscriptions and just anything else, other reasons or ways to play it. So, okay, most people, I feel, are probably not going to get very, like, I don't know, and maybe that's just speculation. I don't know how many people got all the way to the end. I guess you could look at like the trophy list. I think like the last couple chapters is like 14%. So 14% of the people that got the game, which, yeah, that's probably a pretty good stat. If it did 20 million, maybe 3 to 5, and that's kind of being generous, made it to the end. And it's like, and that's just the kind of game I feel like this is. It's a game that I want. I'm not saying, hey, these kind of weird games need to be banned. They're for a specific group of people. I think, including myself, I think I connect with these games. You just have to kind of give them it. You know what I mean? Like when you're playing a game like Death Stranding, you have to be into the story and the way that they're telling it, because that's unique. And then the gameplay is like, you either kind of give yourself over to it or you don't. I tried to find that middle ground of like, I can respect the variety and you doing it a different way than me and me handling it my own way. But, to play this game for 70, 80, 90 hours and do all of the deliveries and all that stuff, build like no other, right? I just couldn't do it, and I won't do it, So there's some things that were holding me back a little bit, but it's a game that sticks. It's a game that as soon as I beat this game, I watched all of the trailers for Death Stranding 2 again, and started pointing things out, my wife and I. We were like, oh, maybe that's this, or okay, we're going to start making theories on it. It's a game that gets you thinking. It's a game that really connects you, I think, mainly to the themes and the lore and the characters and the story, and it makes you, okay, well, what's going to happen in the next game? Well, who's that character now, or how is that connected? Very few games, I think, can do that to me, and this game did it. So let me know what you guys think in the comments. Make sure, as always, you're subscribed to the channel, bell icon turned on, and I hope to see you all on the next one.